Okay, thanks. So we have questions before we. Any comments or questions? Yes.
How much nothing is in horse pastures and cattle pastures? Or just long enough?
We haven't actually been well, we've been to Bill's farm, but the topography of the land really isn't that's not, it kind of comes into a valley, and so that's not where they would want to probably nest because it cuts off their sight lines. So I think it is possible for them to nest in pasture land. We just haven't been.
Pasture has to be grazed. It can't be mowed. You know, it's got to be a natural site, and that's usually not ideal for horses. Now for cattle, like they're doing oh yeah, Carolyn. I mean, you are in charge of managing that grassland with the cattle. So what do what are your keys to success with that land that you created this great staging area where the bobbling stood for refuge at the end of the breeding season?
Right, we've worked on different playing with dates for the cattle to come through and graze, and it seems like every year it's since we figured out that we're a staging area versus a breeding area for the bobblings, that right at the end of June, beginning of July, we have this influx of the bobblings. So I'm able to go in and graze the cattle. Prior to that, graze without mowing, so then we have a nice variation of heights of, and then just leave everything, and they pretty much exit by mid-August. It's definitely an area that we are setting aside for the birds, and I can't say it's the most productive area for the cattle, but yet it is very important for the Elkins and what they want to see with the bird project, and so we make it work.
If I could, since there's a pause here, I'm part of the research team that's been studying adaptive multi-paddock grazing versus conventional grazing practices and how that impacts grassland bird occupancy in the southeastern United States. And I think what we're learning, we have a bunch of papers that have been published and our bird papers currently in review, is that there is a way to keep your land fully productive, keep it all in working land, where you don't have to necessarily set aside, but it's really that change in the management practice to move the cattle pretty much every day. In which case, you at any given point in the season, you'll have that available structure, that habitat. So it sounds like you're doing something similar just by giving an area rest. So
We move our cattle every day.
oh, amazing. Yeah, so you're
For the last
already doing
20
that.
years, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Cattle every day.
Great.
And yet we still set aside this area where we do move the cattle through there, but then come the beginning of July, we say
Specific for staging.
yeah.
That's awesome.
So then it definitely grows up and reseeds lots of invasives that I would prefer not to have there. Yeah, the birds love them. So for the cattle purpose, and then we bring the cattle in by mid-August and really just mow it.
Sure.
And then pull them out and mow it after that.
Okay. Well, I applaud you for using those practices. You could be a phenomenal model for all ranchers in the state. I think that's and I'm a small peanut, right? There's Gabe Brown, Alan Williams, a whole bunch of people on this research team, and the net finding is that this is exactly what you're doing. It really bridges the gap between keeping working lands in production and bringing grassland birds. So awesome.
And I think here we have a lot. We don't have as many ranches with livestock. So what Carolyn's doing is very important. But what's also very important is the scheduling of the mowing, and we do know that this is an inconvenience often for the people actually working on the farms, like Lou. I think you work with Phoebe, and I know I know that if we all waited to the end of bird season, you would have to be mowing 24 hours a day for the month of August. So, I would love to hear what your thoughts are from your perspective on, what maybe could work or what doesn't work, and what do you think people might be willing to do if we identify lands that are really productive for birds? Or what are your challenges? And you can lay it all out on.
It's a catch-22.
Right.
A little bit is, profit, a little bit is, weed management, because of, where we are, kind of chemical, can I say that word?
Yeah. Okay, you're valid, yeah.
It's like, it's a little bit of the chemical, and the birds love the native thistle, and that's not, that they love the seeds and everything, I mean, for the small birds and stuff, but it is obnoxious, and it's not productive, that it does, really take over a field, and, so that, and, we can't let the grass get too old for the compost industry, but, we do like mature, it would be like all farmers taking their corn crop off green. Some people leave it go until it's dry to shell, but, we like to hay mature, and other people like to hay cleaned off so they have a fertile field. So we're gonna have to find a balance.
And I think that's why, oh yeah, go ahead, Stephanie.
And well, I think the other thing is that there's a lot of states that do cost share programs, where like they pay their farmers to do a delayed cut, so you don't see any economic loss. And it'd be great if Pennsylvania had some type of program. I think Maryland has one. And maybe like as a collaboration, maybe that's something that we should also all think about too, because you don't want to have any sort of economic loss if you want to also be able to balance the needs, the ecological value of these properties. And I think maybe just to get some people to the next step, a cost share program or in some sort of incentive in order to do it is really important.
Yeah, there's a model in New England. It's called the bobbling project, and that's exactly what they do. They pay the difference for the farmers so that they can afford to delay the cutting. And it's not every farm. So that's the other thing I think that Lisa was saying, is that not all land is equal. So if we could concentrate on those, those most important lands where we see the highest productivity value, those would be the ones that we would want to say, these are our set asides. Maybe we have a medium, ones that we would keep in the middle, and then other ones that we'd say, hey, we know these are not productive for the birds. So if it works for you, then, we don't need to keep these on the table.
But there's also things you can do to those other non-productive fields that are rather, they're not easy, but if there was funding and we could come up with a plan, like those field strips that you were saying, pollinator borders, those kinds of things are important for like grasshopper sparrows, Savannah, maybe even Savannah sparrows, maybe the horned larks can use that too. I mean, I think the cool thing and the challenge of grasslands are they're complex by nature. And that's why we're sitting here talking about this with so many different people, because no two are the same. And so you're right, the thistle is a real problem, and grassland birds do not like nesting in thistle either. So that's something that we all have to, we are all on common ground there to contend with that noxious weed. And then, I think there is, I know they're doing this out west, creating these borders of grasses. And I know that the thought is maybe that weed seeds would get into the crop areas. But Fred's the director of the community farm program at Rushton, and he knows what that looks like more than anything. And it's a 6-acre organic farm, vegetables, but it's surrounded by pollinator gardens and grasslands and hedgerows. So I don't know, Fred, if you could just say what you noticed. I think actually the birds have been more of a positive impact based on some of the things that they've done at Rushton.
Yeah, we've done extensive studies just looking at, because I, in my farm experience, grew up with just the idea that, okay, if you have borders that have noxious weeds, and it's going to get into your farm fields. And management practices, obviously, there's a lot of weeding stuff with the help of the University of Pennsylvania, we kind of tracked over the years how much the noxious weeds are actually getting into our farm fields. We're finding very little out of the borders that we're maintaining for habitat for birds is actually affecting our farm fields. Now, that being said, we also have a lot of interns that are going out and weeding and stuff like that, but it has supported habitat, and it's fascinating for myself coming from a conventional background that going into a situation where you're helping maintain habitat, that the birds end up in the fields, and that this time of year, if you're picking tomatoes at the end of the season, they're jumping in there and feeding off maybe at 6 in the field. It looks like something out of the movie The Birds, but it kind of lift up and drop down behind you as you walk and harvest. But that's kind of a symbiotic relationship that I hadn't experienced before. And once you start getting past the fear that you're going to have to deal with those invasives in the surrounding borders and recognize that you can farm successfully that way, it makes it a much more comfortable experience working with nature and not against it.
And so I thought, as we move forward, we would like to get input from the farm community, from the landowners, from the biologists, and find ways that, maybe we could meet somewhere in the middle and do some cool things that would improve the bird habitat, but not negatively impact those who are working on the land that keeps this land so beautiful. Because like we said, if you're not working that land, and the developers are in there the next day. So it's important to keep this cultural system alive, but also do it in a way that we can, help. Because if you look back before the agricultural revolution, which happened in around the 50s, 60s, I've been alive, I say only 50 years, but might be a few more, I don't know. But in my lifetime, 70% of all the species on Earth have disappeared in my 50-year lifetime. And that is because of the advent of industrial agriculture to be able to feed more people, more population, the whole thing. If you look at historical growth charts, that's the impetus. So I think before that, we did farm more in harmony with the natural environment. And so we can find some ways to bring that back just a bit, maybe through grassland borders, through pollinator borders, and meet halfway. I think it would be really cool. And I think when you're outside, you must be noticing all the birds. No, you're no. Well,
I know Lou's wife has bluebird boxes, right?
but yeah, I think we all love being outdoors and loving the land and sharing it. So I don't know, but I really want to work together. It's important to all of us what we do. And we want to keep that way of life, so to speak, going forward.
I should say that yesterday I mowed a field that one of the landowners had, and I mowed it, and I got to enjoy 2 bald eagles after they left. I got a red tail hawks come in, and so I enjoyed that. Yesterday I voted today, I raked it, and had a large selection of birds in that field that was left with one season grasses. It started years ago when they had somebody had it incorrect, and then it was left natural. It's very nice to see that.
Well, they were probably enjoying your mowing. Because you were clearing it out for them to just get in there and get it all good.
The moles are, that were in their moles, were quite fun. So they enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually a beautiful example of why we're all here, right? I mean, it's humans working the landscape. It's those working lands that these birds have adapted to and rely on, right? And so I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and from what I've seen, I covered 12 counties in southeastern Pennsylvania, and this part of Chester County has more grassland habitat for these grassland birds than anywhere else that I know of in those 12 counties. I just hope everyone here realizes how special this area is. It's incredible habitat. The only place that comes close in my mind in this area is at Middle Creek, which is owned by the Game Commission. Those are the 2 only main places that I know that have such a wide diversity of grassland birds. And it's because we still have the Grassland component, we still have this land in agriculture that's not being developed, it's special.
And it is, I mean, based on the work that we've just done in the last 3 years, it is kind of an instant gratification system, the grassland. If you make that 2-week mowing delay, the next year, there's twice as many birds in those fields. It is pretty crazy to just be able to see that with your eyes, or the landowner might see it. I know people that ride through deeds have commented on how many more birds there are. So, you know, it can be easily successful with very little impact on all of us. As we move forward, we're hoping to work with the landowners, with our partners at Brandywine, at Stroud, at Natural Lands, you know, and with the farmers and the landowners, and hope that there's a way that we can move forward with this and find out what's the biggest bang for our buck first, but then also do some small changes and see what impacts they have. I think people will be surprised by how impactful a small thing like a grassland strip would be for the survival of a lot of the species. And so I think where we want to go from here, correct? Or would you like to tell them where you'd like to go? Because that's your baby. Your third child.
Yes, my third child. I think what we would like to see is maybe the opportunity to kind of go and walk some of these properties that we haven't already included in our monitoring, and talk with landowners to find out what their goals are, and to sort of assess what's happening on those properties. And with the farmers, maybe we would love to have the opportunity to talk about scheduling and know more about the economic components, the weed component. You know, there are studies that have shown there are different mowing techniques. So I can say, like at Dee Dee's, for instance, the birds really don't go much past, they don't go up on the hill up there. So I don't know what it would take, you know, because I know you have to move your equipment around, but there may be areas of the field that you could mow and you would have no impact. So those are the kinds of farming questions that we would like to start to talk about with farming, is like, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing proposition. And so what are, like, as Lisa said, what are the things that we can do on the edges to see how we can start to shift some things. So those are the two big things, I think, is, you know, continuing with the monitoring and hopefully adding more properties in with the monitoring, so we can, you know, fill in more of those gaps on the map and start to really see where these birds are and get a sense of what are our, as we can sort of create a priority list of fields, and talking with the farmers and learning more about your experience and what your considerations are. And I know we have Carolyn, who's doing cattle, and I don't know who Annie Jones is, but I know that she was supposed to come, and she also has cattle. So we have some different types of fields too that we're looking at. And I know, talking with Jamie, he said that he only does horse hay up until May 25th. And then I guess the hay, the quality of the hay changes, and he really can't use that for horse hay. So looking at which fields are horse hay fields, which fields are mulch hay fields. So I think just really kind of understanding the system, and continuing to look at what is the productivity and where are our hot spots of where we want to prioritize. I think that's where we'd like to go.
Do you have like a 1 to 3 page succinct overview of perhaps mowing schedules and the reasons why, etc.? We're part of the Buckingham Trust, which is part, you know, a big version of the King Ranch landowners. With about 550 person mailing list concentrated in the area. I think the winter / spring issue would be a perfect time for this, because that's when people start thinking about, you know, mowing schedules and planning things for the spring. So you have a 1 to 3 page cheat sheet, if you will, just to get people to start thinking about it. Maybe with a few pictures, and we'd love to publish something like that.
That would be great. Yeah,
It would be great, but this is why we're meeting now, because we don't want to create a document that leaves other voices out and dictate what should be done to the exclusion of other things. And I think by Zoe's map of the different uses, you know, we want to include whether the land is being used for grazing or for crops or for mushroom hay or for horse hay. And so this can't be this is what you do, and here it is. It would be great to just say, right, a thought process. Yeah. Well, I think what we would ideally would like to get together with people like Lou or Jamie and some of the, and create a document that we're all comfortable with. Like, I would love you to read that before we just go sending it out and see if there's some input or something. And then what is the benefit to those that are doing these things? You know, I know you can talk at cocktail parties and say, you should see my bottlenecks. They're fantastic. You know, I know that can happen, but I also want, you know, I just wanted input from all parties that have an interest in this. And then I think that's our end goal, is that document, you know, and I think that's what people want. But I also don't, I want to make sure we're inclusive about how that document is prepared. And so that's why, you know, people like Lou and Carolyn and Jamie Dixon and whoever else is out there that would like to participate, would love your input. And because you guys know probably more than, you know, a lot of us about what's going on out there. You're out there every day. We are, but only during breeding season, you know? So I'm hoping that from this meeting, we'll send out the recording and email, you know, the recording of the stuff. And I'm hoping that we can maybe meet another time where we could have, or maybe meet with different groups and create like a template. I don't know what the best way is to work on this so that we can all come together and create this document with everyone's input, for anyone, you know, everybody, and come up with a program that we call the whatever, you know, the Grassland Bird Coalition collaboration. And create guidelines that everyone can stand behind. What do you guys think about that? What do people think, and are you willing to participate in that process? And what would be our next way to get to, you know, how do you see this happening? Would you rather meet in person? Could we create a Zoom meeting where people have impact? You know, we could start, you know, this is the hardest part right now. I think we're all happy and we're all like, yeah, it seems like we could do this, but now what do we do, right? Any suggestions that we have would be welcome.
I think you got to meet in person a while behind. I think that's most important thing from any perspective is get a feel for what's going on. I think the in-person meeting insights that you're interested in is most effective way of doing that.
Is this reinventing the wheel? This is something that we've done this before. I mean, from the state.
well, yeah, there are groups that are doing this, and we're sort of following the model of the Virginia Working Landscapes. They have I think it's about an 80,000 acre area that they focus on. But they're the ones who developed the birdscape idea. And this is where we are, where they were about 10 years ago. So it's not that we're reinventing the wheel in the sense that, you know, we're going to start a whole new way of dealing with this. But I think what they've done is they had to build from the ground up. And I think that's where we are now too, is, you know, starting to build this collaborative group and really thinking about the issues that we have in this area. Because the other thing that we find when we're looking at, you know, these different programs that they have is they have different constituents. So down in the Virginia Working Landscapes area, that's a lot of cattle farming. So they've been working closely with American Farmland Trust to think about their how they're doing their cattle management. In New England, it's a lot of dairy farmers who are farming their own land, and they need to think about when they're cutting that grass. Here, we have a mulch hay industry that's using our hay, and that actually can accept seasoned hay. But we also have landowners who are having farmers come and farm their land. So I think we can use pieces of what others have done, but I think we also need to think about what is our unique situation? What are the opportunities that we have here that maybe other places don't have? And how can we, be creative in using our assets to the fullest for the farmers, for the landowners, and for the birds?
And promote it in a way that helps the farmers, like, appreciate that they're actually doing.
Right. We want you to get credit that you care. I mean, and there are organizations that do that too. So Audubon has, is it Blue Nest Beef? They have farmers get certified that they're farming under the Audubon's protocol, and then they can sell their beef at a premium because they have Blue Nest beef. And did we get the bobolinks?
No, we didn't get it.
Oh,
Sorry.
I mean, one of the farmers actually is creating jerky that they call bobolinks.
The farmers plus concert are co-authors on a paper. Like, so he's a collaborator, he's an amazing guy. And yeah, I mean, if I had known, I would have been happy to get the inside discount and bought 500 bobolinks.
Oh, yeah, well, you better bring them to the next meeting, Mike.
So, I mean, I think we're touching on a couple of things that are important. When you mentioned, like, yeah, Virginia has this model. I was involved in a southeastern regional model and one in the prairie potholes of Canada and the Midwest, upper Midwest. So the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas. The land uses are different in each of these states. And I just got into dairy in Michigan. You're 100% right that here is unique. Right, but between the mushroom hay and the horse hay, like every region is different, even though the land might look the same from a bird's eye, right, unintended. The land is true that the priorities may vary, and I think you guys are spot on. First off, you've done amazing science. I'm really impressed with the level of detail that you've been able to prove. You can make intimate, meaningful recommendations to landowners now with this model, and you prove that it scaled up, right? Your model worked. Once you prove it, which is exciting. Really, I think honestly, your missing link right now is investing more in the farmers, looking at the economy, the land management. So like all the research that I've been involved in is coming from a different angle. It's not the nonprofit angle, it's General Mills, it's Cargill, it's McDonald's, it's people that are buying meat, that are buying oats at mass, right? And so it really is a farmer-centric approach, right? So there's like a deep software model that they provided for the farmers to document their land management and then bring that into the fold. And on the science is kind of on the side, right? We're just like, hey, hopefully we can find some things that will modify this because the person that's cutting your check wants to have organic beef or, yogurt that's, certified or whatever. So the priorities are different, but the end result is collaboration between conservationists and land, the people that are actually working the land. And so I think you guys are spot on. Your priority should be to focus on the farmers, building the appropriate voice for the people that are actually working the land, so you can see how it can functionally work in a win-win. This is a yes and not a no but, right? You can remain economically productive by producing within parameters that support grassland birds. And I've seen that model work in other regions. I can't guarantee it'll work here, but it sounds like you're already starting to sniff out some potentials and are honest about some of the challenges. Right? There's work to be done, and that has to happen. Taking walks in the field, bringing, I would love to see Understanding Ag come out and, talk to people on the field and help, bring that economic farmer-based model into this conservation conversation.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask if people are doing bird surveys in these areas in the winter time as well, by year-round conservation value, because there's a lot of unusual birds that probably value these habitats, like kestrels, very important short grass habitats for hunting in the winter time, and then sort of pipits, unusual sparrows, all that kind of thing in the winter time.
We haven't, but we do have a nice pipeline from Penn. We have the Masters of Environmental Studies, and they're always looking for projects. So put it on the list, Lisa.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because, part of why there's less meat pressure. It's because of the winter birds that come in and eat all this. They're all seed eaters. They're here to eat seeds, white-throated sparrows, dark-eyed juncos, all of them. So it's an interesting thing is to start that. I mean, forget, we are limited in resources, so we have been doing a lot with very little. And that's what we're working on, that I think it maybe we teamed up, like, this is a place where the other conservation organizations can help. I mean, you guys know how to you have access to properties to monitor. We sit down, we figure out who can monitor what, who's doing it, what time of year, put it into eBird and use that data. And as funding becomes available, we collaboratively go for it and try to run, build this program into a great way to monitor, so that when people are making the right choice, or when people are doing things that are small changes, they get the results back and see how that's benefiting. So you're not just spinning your wheels and saying, I don't know if it's working or not. The part of it is to see if it's working. So there's a lot that has to be done. A lot has been done. And we're getting closer, and I know the landowners just want a nice, like, what do I do? Here it is, but that is just so much more complicated. But I think if we can move to that, that's the holy grail, right, of this concept. But it's not as easy to get there because of the complexity of you saw that map with all the different kinds of mowing and crop, all the different things, the constituents, the size of the property. There's so many factors that maybe what that looks like is we go to those landowners and we look at that property and monitor, we sign up as a landowner and say, I'd like to know something about my property. You say, who's your farmer? Well, it's Lou. We know Lou. We met him at that meeting, and we go sit down and have lunch with Lou with May, of course. And we sit down and we say, Lou, so-and-so came to us and wants to see about this. And so we maybe could do it, I don't know, it could be a case by case thing, or it could be some general guidelines, or it could be both. So these are the challenges that we're looking at and what we're trying to do in it. Yes, ma'am.
Would it make sense to start with a list of priority landowners and start talking to those landowners?
Yeah, we could start with that. Yeah, I think we've already started with, landowners that we know are because she did this whole map on, right, the hot spots are where you would start.
5 properties we're working right now. We will 5 more next year.
Yeah, I think that we would like to do that. One other thing, though, going back to that article is I think it would be a great opportunity to introduce this to the people who get your newsletter. So maybe we can't provide solutions, but I think it would be, I'd love to be able to write something up to get the word out and to get people thinking about this and invite more people to come in and help us think creatively.
Suggested too, since Bill Elkins are one of the original King Ranch landholders, to revolve it around them as the example.
Well, Bill has been quite a champion. Because he fell in love with the bobbies, he decided he was going to get a Motus tower on his property. So that was really the impetus, I think, for getting this project going. And because of that, we've learned so much about these birds. So it would be great to be able to celebrate what he's done.
I could also mention something else. The farmers, Lou, yourself, Jamie Hicks, Les Goldsmiths, etc. I see you all as doing the core of farming the majority of the properties in our area. It used to be in the day, this is Hannah, everybody came out here for horses. That is not the case anymore. I bet about, I'm also real estate, I bet about 60 to 75% of our buyers these days are not horse people. And I say so often, these are the farmers you have to reach out to if you want your fields either maintained, or I say maintained, cut for hay, etc. Because they're looking, they don't want to maintain it, they just want to own it. And have the privacy, but it's that synergy between the landowner and yourself. So I think actually you probably have the best resource.
One thing I want to say, and I think that I've known Zoe, and I seen her out in the field 10 years ago when she was doing her studies, and she was out there wondering, who's gonna bother me out here in this field? You know, I'm the only one out there, you know what I mean? Stop and said hi to her one time, and I just remember the name Zoe, that's all that I could remember, and I continued for a lot of years, and then the last couple of years since we did her studies, I got, you know, and she called me and said that we're going to do this study, you know, more intense in the last couple of years. But one thing that you have to say, she had worked on this for 10 years. I have to go back to something else. The farmer was, the no-till for farmers to get over that situation of ugliness of their corn stalks still standing and no-tilling a crop in a soybean or corn or alfalfa. And it is working, because I had one of the first no-till drills that Hoover sold up there 40 years ago. But it's, yes, it's going to take her lifetime to get this through, but it has to start somewhere. And this is the only place, and I can only look at it as the no-till farming has taken 40 years for us to progress to where we are now to save the topsoil for going into the Chesapeake Bay. I think that is a large situation, a large land mass, and we're talking about something here, only in part, but it is a picture of what farmers need to look at, and the land that we do go and farm should be involved.
What I'm hearing is, you know, mostly ag centric, ag farming centric for this. I only wonder about that because at least in Chester County, commissioners are very proud they preserve 30% of the county. So a lot of this land is land trusts, and grading line, natural lands have these huge preserves out there. They're hungry for this information too. I know both the organizations have they would certainly be early adopters of all these things. So I think the final publication of the final thing should not be only ag centric. That there are a lot of private landowners that are not looking for production, but don't know what to do, or looking for alternatives that manage their land that don't cost a great deal of money. You know, things like putting farmers in mulch ag is a wonderful idea. I think it has a lot of benefits for what we're talking about. What is the window? I heard the number like May 29th was the last day somebody makes force that. I realize things change every year, but vary by weeks or so. What's the window after that mill period that the mushroom industry likes? Is it like a month after or 2 weeks after?
No, it would probably be the end of June. We don't want it dry and brittle to where it dissipates, you know, the long fescues in the orchard grasses. We don't want it to go that far, but we don't want it to have, we want the cellulose in the stalk to be dry for the mushroom industry. We don't want that wet, sappy, like you would make feed hay.
Right.
So you're into the late June.
Okay. And is that line up ideally with what you were thinking for the birds?
It lines up pretty well. Yeah, I mean, we would like to see June be mow free, maybe
Yeah.
for those fields that have the birds in them. But yeah, that sounds like it. It looks like there's opportunity there to make it work.
I just, you know, wonder about the mowing happening too late with that, you know, sort of having only robin habitat of winter. I was thinking sometimes if you mow around the 4th of July or something like that, you get enough growth afterwards, the thing would be still have habitat besides the
Right. Yeah, I don't know about the regrowth, but I think, you know, that's also a consideration, I guess, with some fields is to get that second cutting. Star?
Yeah, I just want to say, and I was thinking about this before, the county commissioners have been really helpful in maintaining open space. The county information is something that they should do too. Definitely, because this is probably an aspect that they haven't even thought of, in terms of supporting what they do as being something that is good for everyone in the area. Yeah, people driving along the road, the people who are, decide to move here and want to just look at the land. That this is actually a selling point for keeping open space, and it's worth letting them know so that they can show the public that their efforts to keep open space have been successful in a way that no one really was thinking about necessarily at the time.
Yeah, I think we have a lot to be proud about in this area. And maybe we haven't, been specific enough about all of the things, all of the benefits of what we have done. I will say, just sort of anecdotally, I met Dee Dee years ago, and she was very generous in letting me go out and do my surveys, but I don't know that I think she was sort of noticed the birds, but it was not as like a focal point. And as we've been out there, I think she has noticed it, and it's become a point of, interest and wanting to share it. And she has horse people who use her barn, and we met a few at the Purple Martini event, and they said, "Oh, we were out there and we saw the bobolinks." So, I mean, it is a point, I think, that people can derive enjoyment from their land. That is probably something that a lot of people, they don't necessarily consider until it's like, oh, wow, that's really special. So that just goes to the point of like, we do have this preserved land, and there are so many layers of what it does for this community. And we need to, I think, be proud about it and also to celebrate it. And Brandywine has been, you hold the stronghold of this land in this area, and it's just amazing what you have accomplished in creating this green belt when we see the development that's just pushing in everywhere else. So it's as I said, it's a special place in the world.
And so on that note, I think we will adjourn the meeting, since I know people have other things to do. We've been here quite a while. I appreciate everyone's input, and then you'll be hearing from us, and we're going to think about the next steps and try to do it over the winter before the farm season starts. And thank you all for coming, and I really appreciate your input. Everybody.
Yes,
Thank you,
thank you.
Dan and Zoe, for great presentations.